What's up, Internet? This is Twinstiq. This is the Twinstiq Game Club. We've recently reformed. I actually wasn't here for the first Game Club. But we got a group of people together. We rolled a D5, chose some games, and a person with a number happened to be Grey Wolf.
Hello.
Grey Wolf.
Of course it was.
Hi. Well, hold on.
Grey Wolf chose
be-
a rather charming 1990 title called Loom from our
Good friends at
LucasArts.
LucasArts, yep.
Yeah, I was going to say good friends, but I think that's a lie.
They're Disney now.
Yeah.
Yeah, now long forgotten friend.
Yeah.
Our recently deceased friend at LucasArts.
Yes. There you go.
So anyway, we've all been playing Loom up to a certain point. At least I stopped at that certain point. I don't know if everyone else did.
Yes.
I did.
Yes.
I did, yes.
Okay.
I did.
Okay,
And,
I will be
yeah,
right-
we're gonna talk about that. So who wants to go first? I don't really care. I'm done now.
Sure.
Not me, because I'm gonna be right back.
Okay. My goats are quiet.
I guess I'll go first.
Sure.
Well,
So-
what do we want to talk about? Do we want to just talk about our experiences with it
Impressions?
first?
Just,
First
a general
impressions,
experience with
and
the game.
then-
I assume.
Yeah,
I
let's just
actually.
go through some real quick first impressions then.
Yeah.
Go for
Okay.
it. Go for it, True.
I was actually shocked with how. I mean, the music is nice for such a dated game, but I was also shocked about how quiet the game was too.
Okay, I can tell you about that. There's a reason for that, but we'll get there.
Grey
Okay?
Wolf's back, everyone. Grey Wolf is back.
I am
But with that being said,
I'm
like,
back.
it's a very calming game, and for somebody that plays, like myself, that plays a lot of puzzle games, I wasn't really tricked by anything. It had very interesting mechanics, because I put it on, I think, normal difficulty,
Yeah.
and then I went back and I watched Grey Wolf's video where he's doing it on practice mode, and I mean practice mode would obviously make it a lot easier, but
It does.
with that being said, like if you write down, the clue, the notes and whatever where they land on the staff, it's not that hard. And I find it pretty fun. It feels like it's going back and looking at the roots of a series, because eventually then you get Monkey Island out of this stuff and other great, point and click adventures.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to talk about the kind of their first impressions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think,
yeah,
we're going to go through it.
Go
yeah,
ahead.
For sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I was actually so when I first started playing it, I was playing it like I used to do Monkey Island and games of that nature, where every time I got stuck, I would just try every combination of everything I could possibly do on everything that I could possibly interact with, which is a terrible way to play this game, because
Yes.
hearing the same 4 notes like over and over and over and over and over and failing, it drove me insane. And finally I said, you know what, screw it. I'm not going to mess around with it unless I think I know what the answer is.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more fun after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got stuck on first there too. I was able to just memorize by thought the first couple drafts, but there was just a certain point where I think it was trying to figure out where to use the draft the owls give you, and I just couldn't figure that out for the life of me.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a little bit obscure
Yeah.
The
though.
darkness one.
And I
Yeah.
kept forgetting
Yeah.
what it was, and I went out to just find if somebody had written up what all the drafts were online. And I found a website. It was like, oh, night vision is this draft, and I was like, night vision? Oh, the owls probably gave me night vision, so I could probably
Yes.
cast that on the darkness.
You know what my clue was for that?
Yes.
When you see the owls, right? Do you just see the eyes?
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yes.
hole? And then when you go to the tent that had the darkness, you could see eyes in the darkness.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And that was like,
Yeah.
huh, okay, maybe I cast that here.
yeah.
That's
And
the
that-
same clue I got out of when I was figuring out that section, and I found the owls, and I'm like, well, owls see well in the dark.
Yeah, right.
Maybe that's my clue,
Yeah, right.
that-
I
Unfortunately,
think it would have worked a little bit better. Like maybe more people would have picked up on it faster if they had been cats, like feral cats or something.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's one of the few drafts that isn't really well telegraphed. It's not clear what it's doing
Yeah.
until you actually use it. Then you're like, oh snap.
Yeah, makes sense. But I'm kind of
Right.
surprised that's really the only place I got held up on it, because I played a lot of adventure games as a kid, obviously, but I was always shit at them. And so I never got very far. I think the furthest I ever got was in Monkey Island. I certainly didn't get far in Grim Fandango or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
But-
you want to talk about areas that I got stuck on, which are ridiculous. I don't know if I missed like the prompt or like the learning opportunity that I should have hit, but I got to that damn tornado,
Uh-huh.
and it took me forever to figure out that I could play a song backwards.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
how am I supposed to do that? I'd done everything. I had touched I could not figure out how to do it. And then I learned you could play stuff backwards, and I was like, well, that's just stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I did the same thing.
Actually, I thought that was something where I kind of got stuck, and then I got there, and I'm like, for some reason, my geeky mind went to the Flash, and I'm like, well, how did
Yeah,
how do we stop a tornado? Oh, we run it in the opposite direction.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what if this is like Ocarina of Time or something? Can I play something backwards? And
Right,
I
well,
played
even-
it backwards.
Even Bobbin says it, right? When you're there, he's like, there must be a way to untwist it. And I was like,
Yeah.
untwist,
Yeah.
untwist.
Yeah. Well, they also have you practice on that a little bit with the paints, because when you're dyeing the cloths,
Yes.
those are just backwards
That-
and forwards.
That's
And
the
kind of
teaching
the
opportunity
tutorial
for
area.
you can do things forward and backwards. The easiest way to know in Loom whether or not you're going to be able to play a song backwards is if it's a palindrome. If
Yeah.
it's a
Right,
palindrome,
right.
you'll never be able to play it backwards.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
not a palindrome, you will be able to do the reverse of what you're doing. That's the
Yeah,
easiest
I-
way to know.
The fun thing when you're getting the new ones though is trying to figure out what
When,
it does.
yeah.
And so like my notes are so confused. There's question marks everywhere.
Right.
Height? Question mark. Reveal? Maybe. Tornado?
Yeah,
question
yeah,
mark.
yeah.
I had no idea what things were, but eventually you figure out what it does. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way Loom was designed was it was designed to be finished. Okay. It's not a very long game. So with that in mind, what they did was, and it's very clever because everything emanates from the distaff. If you look at the distaff, absolutely every puzzle uses it. So when you pick up a draft, right, you know that there are only so many drafts that you have,
Mhm.
and then you look at the situation that you're in and you say, what makes sense for this particular situation? And a lot of the time, it's almost easy to see what you're going to do. But in some of the cases, it's a little bit difficult. Like, the one thing that I think trips a lot of people up is when you get to the glass island, and you see those workers up in the top.
Oh.
Yeah,
floor.
that took me a little while too.
And you know because you've had it happen to you that there are people on the island that can turn invisible, and you've learned the draft,
Yeah.
right? So it stands to reason, because it looks like they're casting it on themselves, that you should cast that draft on yourself to turn yourself invisible. But no, what you do is you cast it at the people in the tower, and you cast
Yeah.
invisibility.
But you don't
And suddenly-
you don't cast it when you're close to them. You have to cast it while you're outside the
Yeah,
tower,
that
which was
too.
which was
That
the part
was-
that I got to me.
To
I was
me,
like,
that was
well, how
that-
am I supposed
to me,
to
that-
pass the draft if they just kick me out as soon as I get to them? Because I never really even
Yeah.
noticed them outside.
to me that was kind of confusing because when you're outside and you see them, I thought, because given adventure games, I'm like, oh, that's way too far away for me to do anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. Sometimes it's very easy to figure out what to do, but sometimes it's not always easy to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, right. To actually
Yeah.
put that in practice.
And I didn't even understand. So I figured out the cast the invisibility thing on the tower and then go up there, but it still felt weird, like it, because I got up there and I was the invisible one.
Yes.
And I was
Yeah,
like,
you,
that
you
doesn't
essentially
feel
cast
right.
it on the room.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I felt. But even then, you would think it would make the, if it makes you invisible just going in there, you would think it would make the two workers invisible as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I tried to, I was even looking at my light spell to see if I could cast it backwards, and you can't because it's a palindrome. But I was like, maybe
No.
I make the room dark and then I sneak through or something.
Yeah. Right. And one of the great things I think about Loom is that it encourages what Yoda calls playfulness, because you're trying to figure out, because you got this whole big sandbox of songs that you can play, and you're trying to figure out which one makes sense, but you can try them all. Not all of them will have.
The game definitely does have a good dramatic element of play in the game, and literally the sense that you're playing drafts, and you're literally told to just experiment and play around and see what happens. And
Right.
I think with that being said, the thing that I liked about Loom the most was something that I've never really seen in a lot of games is the whole 30 or 40-minute audio drama that takes place before the game.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was such a nice touch to the game.
Yeah. It's a great lead into the world of Loom.
Yeah,
with
I
that
actually
being
listened
said,
to that after I had gotten to the dragon, so I was kind of enjoying experiencing the world and just getting hints about the context of what was happening there,
Right.
a la Dark Souls kind of.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
cues are so
explicitly
well
tell you.
placed. I really like that.
Yeah, with that being said, like, you don't need to listen to the audio drama.
Oh no!
And in fact,
No, definitely not.
In fact, I think it's almost a little bit more fun not to.
Yeah, because
like you
can
say,
construct
like,
a lot of it.
yeah, it's like Yoda said. It's like, it's kind of left up to you to interpret the things that are going on there.
Yeah, and I'm sure as we play more, it'll become a little bit more clear about the things you have question about in terms of Bobbin's relation and stuff like that. But the audio drama definitely confirms a lot of your suspicions as to who Bobbin is.
So let's talk a little bit about the audio drama and the music specifically, because I think it was Andrew who pointed out that for a game based around music, it's very silent.
Yeah.
No, that was me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So for the audio drama, what they did was the idea was it was all world building. They got a bunch of people in and they said, okay, so we're going to record this audio drama. It's going to go. It's front loaded into the game, and so when you get the game, as I got it when like a long time ago, you open up the box, and inside the box there was literally a cassette tape, right? And before you do anything else, that was the first thing you did. You'd put the cassette tape in and you'd listen to it. And it would give you a fair amount of detail about the world. Now, the way the world is structured in Loom is that it has these little islands, and on each island there's a specific guild, because this is the age of the guilds. And the supposition, like the timey-wimey fan theory, is that this is our world, but set like 8,000 or whatever years into the future.
Yeah.
And magic is kind of returned, and you can do these crazy things because of the Loom specifically.
Yeah.
And the way it works out is that each guild has got an island to themselves, and they are not stuck to that island, but that's the island that they control. So the audio drama kind of fills this in for you, and then you read the manual, and it fills in a little bit more about the weavers, who are the people that you're part of. The weavers weave the pattern of the world. They didn't start off doing that. They started off doing just basic weaving, making a hat or whatever. And then it ended up that they knew how to control the fabric of reality. And so Bobbin is inextricably kind of intertwined with that. We don't understand how yet, but he is. So Loom and the music are very sort of intertwined, because a lot of that, I don't know if anyone ever looked into it, but it's all based on The Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky. It's just variations.
Yeah,
I definitely got that, yeah.
Okay, so now to answer your question about why such a silent game, it went through several revisions, and the first revision was the disc version. And the disc version has a lot of the music still intact. But they had to go to CD-ROM because that was the format of choice about 2 years later. And when they went to CD-ROM, they made this awkward decision that they would go with Red Book Audio. And the way Red Book Audio works is that you only get 70 minutes of recording time. Okay? So whenever you're hearing music, you're literally hearing the music that they recorded for that sequence that gets pulled from the CD-ROM at that point in time, like in a cutscene. So there's very little incidental music as a result, because they didn't know at that point how they could make incidental music work for CD-ROMs without actually accessing the Red Book audio,
Yeah.
of which there was only 70 minutes.
I honestly feel like it's kind of to the game's benefit, though, because, I mean, the music is just as much about the notes that aren't played as the notes that are,
Yes.
and I feel like it really helps build out the times where you create the music or find music within the world, more so than it would be if there was always sound being played constantly. It feels like you're adding something to the world because there's really nothing there to begin with. I think
Yeah,
it makes
That's
it better
that's
for
a
it
really good
because
way
of
of
it.
looking at it. I mean, I don't look at it that way because I've only ever played the disc version. I'm now playing the CD-ROM version for you guys, just to have
Yeah.
visual confirmation on the recording that we're doing, just so that people can see what we're playing.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting, though, to find
And-
out that it wasn't their intent, because playing it, I definitely felt like it was. It's kind of like when you've learned that Steven Spielberg wanted Jaws to be, like, in the movie throughout the whole time, but they just couldn't get Bruce, the mechanical shark,
Yeah.
to work properly, and so by proxy, they just didn't have him in the movie very much, but that's what creates the whole drama through the whole film.
Right,
is
That's,
the
that's what
Bruce
gives you the
shark.
attention. Yeah.
But it
Well,
wasn't,
that-
wasn't intentional, and it's surprising to hear that this wasn't intentional either, because I think it works so well in its favor.
Yeah, I do too. I
Yeah.
I actually put it down towards, like, if there's music going on in the background, it might drown out the notes that you're supposed to hear. And
Yeah.
No, because the way they programmed it was very smart. What they did was because in the old days they only had so many music channels, every time you played a draft, it would actually, like, chop the music right there.
Right, it would just cut it.
Play the draft, and then the MIDI sequencer would remember where the music was, and it would kick back in, like, after you'd done the draft.
You know what I would, if they ever did like a remake of this game or a sequel, I would like to see it. Have you guys ever played Bit Trip Runner?
No.
It's a kind of a music rhythm game, but
Yeah.
not really. But the idea, so that you have this background track that's going on as you run. Well, as you do things and pick up power-ups, they're spaced in such a way that when it makes those special noises, it matches perfectly with the music. So I'd love to see them find a way to, when you
Oh yeah, that would be pretty
matches
awesome.
with the background and just stands out a little bit, but you could kind of
That would be really
mix it in.
interesting to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we
Yeah.
finish with first impressions? Did everyone go through and
Yeah, I
those
think
before we
so.
start
I mean,
talking
I,
more about the music?
I
in
can't
depth?
really do a first impressions because I played this game before.
yeah,
I
you know,
love
your
this
first
game.
impression
You
was a
could
while
give
ago.
your came back to it impressions. You could.
If you had asked me this in 1990, I would have said I'm so confused by this game because in 1990 you got to understand that the landscape was completely different. It was all sort of very serious, very heavy RPGs, and all very serious, very heavy kind of adventure games.
Yeah.
And here comes Loom. Loom is this game that's designed to be finished. It is like a LucasArts game in the sense that there is just enough humor to tide you over, but it's a little dark too because I mean when you think about it. At the beginning, Mother Hetchel says there are two choices. You can embrace the chaos, or we can find the swans. Okay? And you'll notice that throughout the game so far, Bobbin has made a concerted effort to find the swans. He doesn't want there to be chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit dark, and it's very short. And this is not in keeping with most of the games I've played before. So coming back to it now, 25 years later, it's a wonderful kind of warm, fuzzy homecoming feeling because I know this game. And
With that being
I'm-
said, I mean, nowadays, there would be an option. I think more people would choose like the chaos route.
Sure.
So with that being said, it's kind of nice. I mean, it's indicative of old school gaming that, you know, Bobbin is on the path to find his people, find the swans or whatever.
And you'll notice that every place he stops, he says, "Have you seen the swans?"
Yes.
Yeah. There's no oh, this character can be whatever you want it to be kind of thing that we've grown to see in modern gaming these days.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
no, Bobbin is Bobbin, and you're gonna have to play as Bobbin. And I like
And
that.
there's very few games nowadays that kind of do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I was kind of having this conversation, not to get off topic, but like Red Dead Redemption, it's in the name that you should be finding redemption for your character, but being a Rockstar
Right.
game, they
You
still
can
give people
twist
the
John
option
Martin,
to
yeah.
murder and
Yeah.
all
Yep.
that stuff.
I feel like
mean,
that game would have been better as the Red Dead Revolver thing, where because Red Dead Revolver wasn't an open world game, and I feel like if you just play the story in Red Dead Redemption and just do it as a linear experience that way, it's excellent. But yeah, it becomes such a disconnect when you go, okay, you're supposed to be a super nice guy who's always on the right path, but you can tie up a nun and throw her on a train track and watch her explode. Like, all right.
Yeah.
Doesn't
So it's
quite
it's
make
one of those
sense.
things where it's like I think nowadays that it's become such a staple in gaming that you have to give that moral choice. I mean, BioWare's kind of set that
Yeah.
moral choice up.
Right.
I would
well,
say.
But yeah,
um,
BioWare
if you
is
don't
also
give a
like,
choice, you're considered on rails now at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's frustrating for me. So like someone like Rockstar will make Red Dead Redemption, and it's in the name, so they want you to play as a good guy. They want you to find redemption, but they don't want to set you on the rails, like you said.
Yeah,
So-
and what's odd is I feel like one of their best games in like the past 10 years is probably Max Payne 3, which is a on rails linear third person shooter that's just a callback to old school games of that type, and they just do it really well. And you just play as Max, and he is his character, and you play through the story.
But with that being said, like it's really nice to go back and play games like Loom, or
Yes,
go
it
back
is.
and play Grim Fandango that they just did an HD remake. And relive those things of where this is very much about story, and the story isn't about a bad character. It's about a boy trying to find his people, or
Yeah.
a skeleton detective trying to solve a case. So that's really nice. I mean, and that's part of the charm about playing Loom for me is it's
Right.
just a very relaxing game.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the puzzles, even when I got stumped, I never got frustrated.
Yeah.
No, I was always just kind of like, oh, the world was so endearing that I was always interested to just walk around and find
Right.
out what to do.
I think
Right.
part of the reason it's so relaxing is that, at least from what I've experienced so far, you can't really die. Like there's no.
You can't die.
You can?
You can't. There's
Can't,
there's
okay.
one
Okay.
place where you can get stuck, and Scooter's found it. But
Yeah, I was gonna get to
there's no way to die.
Okay.
LucasArts had this philosophy where their plan was long term. They wanted to make adventure games where you didn't get stuck or die. And Loom is the first kind of proof of concept of that, where they've got it so that you can get stuck once or twice, but you can never die.
Yeah,
And
no,
I-
I'm gonna elaborate on that a little bit. My
Sure,
friend,
yes,
who
actually
spot.
tell us your story.
Yes,
Because
please
that's
do.
an interesting story.
So what happened is I was before I even got the distaff, I was running around the village exploring, and
Right.
when I would see notes, I would write them down, and but when I finally got the staff and I went back around and I was doing the play songs and see what happens kind of thing.
Hmm.
When I found the green flask, which I haven't, which I for some reason hadn't clicked on before, I got it and I didn't have. I think it's a G. I didn't have the G yet on my scale,
Didn't.
so I didn't bother writing down the song because I thought I'll come back to it when I'm ready. When I'm ready for it.
Hmm.
Right.
And and then I moved to the Glass Island, and when you move to the Glass Island, you can't go back
No.
to the other island.
No.
So I didn't have that song in my repertoire yet, and I thought, damn it, I'm gonna need this. I know because this is green glass. There's green glass all over the place. That's the key.
Right.
And so when it finally came time for me to use that, because as soon as you get to the island, you get G.
Yeah.
I went, I got to go back, but fuck, I can't go back. The boat's not here anymore. And so I quit for a little while, and I thought about it, and I was talking to Gray about it, and luckily it turns out that I still had a save game in the die tent. So what I did is I went back to the die tent in that save game, and I just wrote down the song, and then loaded my latest save, and I was fine.
Okay, so we need to explain a technical thing about Loom. What Loom will do is, if you start a new game, it only has 3 different variations of every song, but it might change the variation that you have.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say that there is a draft to open and close doors, and the draft in your version of the game was CCCC, if you started a new game, it might re-roll the draft and say, okay, now that draft is DDDD, and now you're screwed.
Yeah.
See, I noticed that. I noticed that because I went back later when you were posting your videos of it, and I had already gotten to our stopping point.
Okay.
And I had different drafts than you
Yes,
did.
Yeah.
you would have. Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
I
kind of
think
cool."
I think that's cool though. Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. It gives well, first off, it gives you a little replayability.
With that
Yeah.
being said, though, do you have to find the draft in the game, or can you go back later, start a new game, have all your drafts written down, try out, okay, so each
Just
draft
try out
has
all three combinations.
Yeah, all three combinations, or do you actually have to find them in the game to unlock them to use?
Okay,
That's a good
so
question.
you need to bear in mind what
Yeah.
Mother Heschel says right at the beginning of the game. She says that as you use the distaff, you will gain more notes.
Mhm.
So you are sort of forced to do the song and dance with learning a draft, playing a draft, learning a draft, playing a draft. Because if you don't, the game keeps track of how many drafts you actually play. And if
Right.
you don't play a significant number of the drafts, you don't get the notes. It isn't a case of not being able to get the
Okay.
melodies. It's the notes
Yeah,
that are
the notes
problematic.
to be able to actually play them. Okay.
Right. So you could, in theory,
Yeah.
brute force the game. I mean,
Right.
someone's posted up the variations of every draft that you can have. It is possible to brute force the game, but because of the way that this stuff works, it's not possible to progress until you got the notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
So-
And, I was just thinking maybe it was G, maybe it was F that was missing, because it seems like when you to add on to what Gray's saying, when you get the distaff and you finally get the darkness song and you go and unlock the darkness, that gives you a note.
Yes, it does.
I don't remember which note that is offhand, but if
It
you didn't do that,
would have
you wouldn't have got that
given
note. And you
F.
have to do that because you have
It
to
would
have
have
that
given you
note.
F.
Yeah, an F. Okay.
Okay.
And it's really like the way it sets it up. It feels a little bit like an RPG in that sense, because if you don't
Yes.
use the stuff, you don't progress.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's very intriguing that, especially after I watched your video, because I was curious if maybe I missed anything, and I don't think I
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
But it was very curious the different, that they have different songs, or different
Yeah.
variations, I should say. And I was like, oh, that makes, if you ever go back and play again, you may not, your memory may not serve you right.
Right.
And for a lot of games from LucasArts, that's not the case. Like, I
Yes.
remember when they re-released Monkey Island, 2-3 years ago?
Right.
Like, I went back and played stuff, and I was like, dude, I remember this from being a
Right.
little kid.
Yeah.
Right. My thinking about the stuff is, and the variations, is that they were trying to personalize each game to each player. So, I mean, when you think about the story of Loom is very personal, because you're trying to help Bobbin find a flock of swans, essentially. It's not saving the world, it's not trying to stop the chaos, it's not any of those things. And so I think that the design intent with that was that he wanted, Brian Moriarty, the guy who wrote the game, wanted the game to be specific and unique to each player, so that when they compared notes, they would say, okay, I went through this, but my songs were different, making
Yeah.
a unique,
Yeah.
specific Bobbin.
Right.
And I think
that was
I think
kind of
that's
the thing on there.
cool. I think that's cool.
It is.
Yeah, it
It
is.
is.
I mean, if I had to sum up the game so far at this point in one word, it'd be endearing. It's
Yeah.
a very endearing game.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
now, the one thing that I do want to ask everyone, because we haven't actually seen the ending yet, is what are your perceptions? How do you feel about Mandible and Crucible? And what do you think is actually going on there?
I really have no idea, kind of right now.
Okay. So, Mandible and Crucible are the guys that you encounter in the glass tower, and they're talking about a scrying stone, and Mandible is the head of the
Yes.
clergy, and Crucible is the head of the glassmakers. And what they're doing is they're between the two of them. It looks like they're setting up to look at something, and Crucible keeps on going. It has to be 8 hours. It has to be 8 hours. Mandible's going. The scrying stones are only going to work as far as we can make them work, which might be 6 hours. It might be 4 hours.
Yeah, it's not a set thing, right?
Yeah.
No, and then you walk a little bit further, and you discover that the glass makers are a little bit wary and worried about what the clergy are up to, because they're sharpening a giant scythe. And so this
Yeah,
is
To
when
me,
you
it didn't
consider,
make a damn bit of sense at all, being as they're in a glass city, but I figure that'll be revealed at some point.
I think so. My big thing is because you look into the crystal ball, right, and you see like him. You see a paradox situation that I thought was really interesting of him learning a draft that makes people run away
right
before
that's
he even knows the draft. So
Yeah,
I mean I
that's
laughed
true.
I laughed about that because it's a paradox situation.
It really is, yeah.
But with that being said, like I have a feeling that like your character himself is going to cause a bunch of shit, and the reason I say this is because the game is all about trial and error.
right.
And
I don't think he will. I think Bobbin's too careful. If anyone's gonna cause shit,
Yeah.
it's gonna be Mandible.
Yes. Well, you'll see. But the thing that I'm trying to elicit here is, because when you've played the game up to this point, it's very relaxing. It's very soothing. There's nothing really scary about what's going on. The scariest thing that we've encountered so far is a dragon, right? And even in the context of discovering about the dragon, it's because we are seeing that the shepherds are having an issue where they're breeding sheep,
Yeah.
and the sheep are being stolen. So it's not really a world
Yeah, cataclysmic thing. It's
ending
just
thing.
dragons
It's
gotta
just
eat.
there's this dragon,
Yeah.
the dragon's got to eat, and you end up being captured by the dragon. But that's
Right.
where we ended off. So at this point, and this is precisely why I wanted to stop here, we've seen Mandible and Crucible, but we don't really know what they're up to, and we don't really know what they're doing. But it's the first creepy thing that's happened throughout the game. And this is why I'm curious about how people feel about those two characters.
to be honest with you, and maybe this is where the game feels dated, I don't
Right.
really have any feelings
Okay, that's
for
fine.
the character.
That's a legitimate response.
Yeah, I don't
Like-
really either at this point either.
Even when they zoom in on the face of like characters, because they do that. Like
Yeah,
I
they
thought
do.
it was really, I thought it was really cool that like Bobbin's face is behind a hood. Like everyone on that island was hooded. Like I didn't
Yes.
even really realize until they flat out said it that the one was a female and was like your stepmother.
Oh.
Like I didn't
Oh.
really get.
Okay,
Well,
so
I definitely got she was female, but
Yeah,
let's talk about that for the moment. There's another significant little bit of dialogue that you can only actually access in hard mode. So, first of all, is anyone actually playing on expert?
God no.
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 Okay, so I'm going to spoil this because it will happen. There's one bit of dialogue where in the glass-making city, the one guy says there's a myth about the weavers in that if you look under the hood of a weaver, you die.
Yeah.
Okay? And we will see someone actually, or I will try and get footage of it, someone will actually try and do that to Bobbin. So it is very difficult to tell, like just looking at a weaver, what like gender or sex they are, because until they talk, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Because they're just
I actually like that
black
because
and
it makes
white.
them very mysterious, and everyone else so far that seems to kind of regard them as not shady necessarily, but they're a little scared
Yeah.
of them.
they're a little scared of them because, I mean, remember also that
They
it's
weave
transpired.
reality. They're the
Right.
sort of all powerful.
Right,
Guild.
and that's
Yeah.
exactly it.
With
Like,
that being said, I thought it was a design choice to get the player to feel more closer to the Bobbin character by putting
Yes.
them in a hood. Was like, well, then they can't see their face, so they don't know if they're male or female.
Yeah.
Although
Oh.
it's
Right.
kind of obvious that it's male, but I mean, well, possibly, I don't know.
No, I mean
Bobbin
Bobbin is not
yeah.
really a male name. It's a name that you could give to either a
Yeah.
male
Oh,
or
okay.
female.
I thought it was more a male name, but okay.
Okay. So this is why I wanted us to stop at this point, because I think that like Mandible and Crucible are the first really scary people that we actually see, and we don't know what they're up to. But having said that, is this a game that you think that you would have chosen to play by yourself?
No.
No.
Probably not, but I'm really glad that we're doing it in the game club because I really, really like it, and
Yeah.
especially seeing how strongly it's related to Swan Lake. I wonder if they had ever planned to do games based on like Sleeping Beauty and the Nutcracker, because those were the other
Yeah.
compositions
Right.
that everyone else did.
So the guy who designed this, Brian Moriarty, has got a very strong affinity for Swan Lake, and that was kind of why he picked that as the motif for this one. The bad news about Loom is that Loom was going to have a sequel called Forge, and what ended up happening was that between Loom not really selling terribly well and Brian Moriarty just moving on to different projects, they never actually made Forge. And I think that you might have an idea there that they probably never pursued, but it would have been interesting to pick different, because I think that the idea behind Forge was that they were going to go and set it with the Smiths, because the Smiths are a guild, and they were going to pick up a thread that had been dropped in Loom about the Smiths, and you'll meet the Smiths eventually. And they were going to pick that up and run with that as the next guild that they were going to focus on. So it might not even have been music focused.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
Right.
a really cool idea for the world. I love the idea of the different guilds, and you could go and have completely different gameplay elements and design
Right.
choices just based on what guild you're following.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for each one.
Right.
Each one
It
could have a
definitely
separate
seems
story.
like Moriarty spent a lot of time building the world in this game, and it really comes
He
out,
did.
even in the short amount of time I spent playing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm gonna say yes. I would have chosen to play this because I don't know of a certain age. I'm not gonna say a certain age necessarily. I'm old enough to have been around when this was out and prior to this, and I think I liked adventure games, and I probably would have chosen this if I had known it was around. I'd never heard of it until Gray mentioned it, though.
Well, with that being said, I may have stumbled upon it because of my affection of LucasArts.
Yeah.
And I may have read about it. I don't know if I would have sought out to play it.
I
necessarily.
definitely never heard about it, but if I saw the image for this, I would have looked at it and went, it looks probably like a game about sewing, and it's called Loom. I'm going to pass. That's probably why it didn't sell very well.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't really...
It's not a catchy.
Yeah.
It's not like oh man, I gotta go play that. That looks that looks
it's
pretty
not
crazy.
exactly intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't have played it because I have an issue with like early 1990s adventure games where the logic in them is usually
Very
not
That
logical.
shit, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the other
crazy.
thing too. I am terrible at adventure games. I love them because I think the art is really awesome all the time, and I think the art in this is great too. It's just I always get lost and start getting frustrated with those games. And like I've said, I don't think I've ever even finished one fully. So I was very, very surprised to start playing Loom and find that not only was I extremely competent in solving all the puzzles, I think it's just because I'm playing on practice and the game's not all that difficult. But yeah, I would have been turned away from it just because of its old school
Right.
puzzle nature as well.
Mhm.
But it certainly seems to be ahead of its time in teaching you what to do and where to go.
Yeah,
right.
it's
The cues are
actually
all
very
very
good
well
about
placed.
that.
Yeah.
It is very good about that.
Which
I
actually, I
actually-
don't. Go ahead, Gray.
I speaking of difference between difficulty settings, because I'm playing on normal.
Okay.
And because it doesn't have that note bar that it does for you guys in practice mode.
Oh.
Right.
And it doesn't have like where you can actually write down the notes. So actually, what I did was when I noticed the lights of the staff light up, I have these little sticky
Oh, that's a really good idea. Right, yeah.
like notes. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
just stuck them to my screen. So I always made sure that I pressed the right area on the staff
Yeah.
so I didn't mess up.
Right.
Because it doesn't even show you. I mean, it shows you the full area that the staff lights up, but there isn't like a breakdown of where, like a line where the staff breaks.
Yeah.
No.
And I noticed before I did that I would sometimes press the wrong area on a staff,
Right.
and that to me that got frustrating.
Yeah,
So,
the scale isn't very accurate. Like you can
No.
click in one note and click another note, and that
Yes.
got really annoying because that means like because they're
Okay.
they're a few seconds or a second or two apart. So it's C,
Yeah.
E, C, D, and if you mess up,
Right.
you got to do
And if
that
you mess
again
up-
and again until you get it.
That's interesting because when I was playing with the, I was using the actual keys to cast the thing, so I'd press G or I'd press A or whatever, and I could just mash them and do all four in a split second, and it would actually loop through each
Oh,
one.
it just
and
found
cast a spell.
it. See, I didn't even try to use the keyboard. I should have done
yeah, I didn't even
I,
think
I,
about
yeah,
using the
I
keyboard.
just sat back and just used my mouse the whole time.
Yeah, because it's an adventure game, so I thought everything
Yeah.
was done with the mouse. So
that's
now that I know that makes life easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, they directly correspond. If you have the keys on the screen, like it shows you the A, B, whatever,
Yeah.
Right.
it's very easy to just be like, oh, okay, that's the button I'll press.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I don't know why I didn't think about it in the first place. It's a little silly now.
Okay, so let's very just quickly talk about the difficulties because I have brought it up. So the difficulties are practice, standard, and expert. And on practice, what it does is it shows you the song, and then it also actually has a reminder after the song is played. This is the song that just happened. Now, the reason why I'm playing in practice mode is because I should probably not say this because it's a Twinstiq, but I'm doing an LP of the game, a let's play of the game, and for me to pause and look down all the time, and I find this a design choice that was a bit weird, and I wouldn't have done it this way if I were by Moriarty. But the distaff is at the bottom of the screen, and the action is happening at the top of the screen. So sometimes what's happening is you're casting a draft, or a draft is happening, and something else is also occurring at the top of the screen,
Yeah,
which forces you
that's
to
true.
look down at the distaff.
Yeah,
and that steals your
not
focus.
At the spectacle that's happening before you.
To be,
Right.
I can make a comparison to that, and it's frustrating. So, as we've talked about within our group, what are you playing? I've been playing The World Ends With You on DS.
Oh, yeah, that game
And-
is very bad about that.
And it's very frustrating because
Yes.
you fight with a partner, and one partner is fighting on the top screen, and
Right,
you're
and the
fighting
other
on the
one's
bottom
on the
screen,
bottom.
and you have to control both at the same
At the same time. Yeah.
And for me, it's very frustrating. Like, it's a really intriguing game, and I keep going back to it because it's now considered a cult classic. But because of that mechanic of action going on top screen, but what you actually really need to focus on is the bottom screen, to me, that is incredibly frustrating.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty annoying.
And that is kind of why I'm playing Loom on practice mode.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, before I forget to mention this, if
Sure.
anybody, I doubt it because I think we're past any point you can get stuck anymore. But when I got stuck, to go back through this, Grace suggested I think you can skip dialogue with the period key,
Yeah.
and that works, but only for the written dialogue. The
good.
voice
Okay, I
dialogue
wasn't
still
sure.
has to play, so it doesn't save you
I-
any time at all.
I wasn't sure because the thing is that LucasArts were building that engine piece by piece as they made each game.
Yeah.
And so some features only got added in later. Like the save and the load thing on the disc version is super weird. And the new games don't use it like that at all. But this is just a function of the fact that every game they would add to the engine, and each game would expound a little bit on what you could do, and the period, the full stop key, is one of the things that they only started adding in later.
Yeah. And it
With that
does
being
work.
said-
It skips the written dialogue. That goes away in an instant.
Awesome.
But the voice dialogue still has to
Does
play.
not,
You
yeah.
can't skip that at all. So
That's because that's Redbook audio, and because it's
Right.
just it's a straight line on the CD. They have to play each line as it happens.
yeah,
With that being said, this is one of those games that I know it probably will never happen, but I would love to see a remake and
It will never happen. Sorry.
everything that like they wanted in it, because as I said, it's so quiet. And I'm not joking with you, like I had nodded off a few times playing it because it is so quiet. Like
Yeah.
I would love to see like music throughout,
Yeah.
music that evolves. I would love to see like, because you talked about originally there was going to be a sequel. Like now this game is incredibly short to what we're used to, so they could cram
Yep.
their original idea of like 2 or 3 games into a single game.
Oh, easily.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm gonna argue against that. I
wouldn't
am
be a fan
sick
of it.
of like people trying to pad these games out to be like, even if they're good content, 100 or 120 hours. Sometimes I just have a couple hours. Like I want to sit down, play it over a couple of nights, and just be done. Right? Be finished.
There's
and
so many
experience
games
the entire
now
story.
that I can't finish because they're so long, and there's so many games that I want to play, and I can't.
Well,
I can't play.
I
all the
understand
games that.
that.
Are 50 plus hours.
yeah, I understand that. I mean, that's why something like picking up the newest Ratchet and Clank game was so endearing, and the fact that
Right.
yeah, if I truly wanted to get a platinum trophy on this, it would take me a long time. I would have to play through the game multiple times, but just to play through it for the story alone, it doesn't take you 50 plus hours.
Yeah.
yeah.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Now, see, I'm one of those guys, and I know a lot of people hate this, but I'm one of those guys that look at games as play value, dollar per hour value. And if I'm going to spend
Yeah.
$60 on a title, I don't want it to be 3 hours long.
Exactly.
Right.
I see.
And now,
I think
I
it depends
understand
on,
that
I
in
think it depends on the
1990 this
quality of
wouldn't
the
have been
game.
60.
Like,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
would,
sure,
I
sure,
would
for
gladly spend $15 again on Journey every time. It's an
Oh
hour
yeah,
and a half
and,
long,
and
but holy crap,
I
what
would
an
I
hour
would
and a
do the
half.
same thing with Firewatch. It's worth it.
Now, see,
But-
I agree with you. Like, I do see things to a degree as dollar value, right? Like, am I getting my money's worth out of this? But I also think that once you hit a certain amount of time, and it really depends on the game, right, and how involved I am in it. But once I get to a certain point in a lot of games, I'm actually losing dollar value because I'm having less and less and less fun.
Oh sure,
Because
yeah.
if-
there's-
I think the perfect example
ready
of
for
that,
it to
that
be
I can
over,
think
yeah.
of is Dragon Age 2. If that game was 30 hours
Oh,
long,
God.
I would have loved it. The problem
Yeah.
is that it's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
80-hour game, and you do the
Yeah, an
same
80 hour
shit.
with the same 4 locations.
The
like,
same 4 locations and the same 3 enemy types over and over.
you know,
Yeah.
with that being said, it's something along those lines, because I was just literally having this conversation yesterday with a friend. And I don't know how many of you have heard about this, because as most of you are PC players, but PlayStation 4, when they kind of launched, they had the Order 1886.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Which
Dr.
is one
S
of the
here loves
most-
that game.
It is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played, but at only like probably 5 or 6 hours, it's very frustrating because I paid $60+ for it when
Oh,
it came
God.
out.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm gonna tell you a scary story now. So, alright, we're playing Loom. Alright? Loom is at most, if you play the disc version and you know what you're doing, and you don't actually speed up anything, Loom is about an hour and a half long. About. Okay? When Loom retailed, it retailed for $50.
Yeah,
Oh.
Whoa.
Oh,
Yes.
That's probably why it didn't sell very well then.
yeah.
No, but I mean, okay, let's put this into context.
Well,
all of those adventure
$50
games,
is a lot of money for 1990.
Yeah, that's a ton.
all of those adventure games were sort of at that price point and sort of that length. Because if you take any good Sierra game and you blow through it from end to end, they're about the same length. So, this whole argument of dollars per hour thing, it would come down to how, because remember also the gaming industry was very different and it was run by a bunch of people who were basically autiers. They would say to their boss, I want to make a game about blah, and then the
Yeah.
boss would either green light it or he'd say no, right?
Yeah.
And what happened with Biomorality was that he came from Infocom, where he wrote a bunch of very seminal adventure games, text adventure games. And he said, as my first project at LucasArts, I want to try this very experimental game about music. And no one said no. because that was just the environment that LucasArts was at the time. You could go off and do whatever you wanted to, as long as in the end you could say to George Lucas, we think we're going to sell X number of copies. And as long as you thought you could make those numbers, he would more or less greenlight your project. Because he didn't care. He wrote off LucasArts as just a quirky thing where he could make tax money go away.
Right.
That was basically how he viewed LucasArts. So when I first saw news about this game, I knew from the outset that it was never going to be a very long game. But I knew that I was going to get a game that I would look at in 20 years' time and go, you know what, that was a fantastic game, and I'm glad I bought it at full price when it came out.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
fair.
think it's worth playing, definitely. I don't know if I would spend $50 on it then. That's a lot of money for...
No,
Yeah.
I could see myself spending 20 on this game.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But,
20, maybe
yeah,
30.
Yeah, maybe 30. I don't know about 50 though.
No, one of the funny things about old adventure games like this, they are very quick if you know what you're doing, but it's kind of like old NES games. If you've played
Yeah.
that game to the point where you know every twist and turn and interaction, you're going to blow through like Castlevania. You can blow through it
Sure.
if you have practiced it enough. But you get a game like Monkey Island. Yeah, the first
Right.
playthrough might take you 80 hours because you get stuck on every
That's
single puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back then you didn't have the internet that you could go to and just
No.
there were no
skip
walkthroughs.
You
through.
had friends, or you
Yeah.
had magazines.
It was a weird time where you had like the playtime was based less on the length of the game and more on
And
the
more on
difficulty
how
that it
long you
gave
would
you.
get
or-
stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that's why old NES games were so
problem-
difficult, because like they weren't very long, but something like Battletoads or Silver
still have.
Surfer were incredibly hard because that's where you kept playing and you got your plays
That's
value.
what got you to come back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
like,
I still... So
Go.
a quick story, right?
Sure, go for it.
Pretty unrelated. The other day I was in my garage digging out my old mountain bike. So I want to fix it up and ride it again. I haven't ridden in a long time. Anyway, I was in there digging out my old mountain bike, and I found a box that said old NES stuff, and I found Battletoads in it, and I was like,
Oh,
dude,
awesome.
I really want to find
Nice.
the NES now and see if it still works. Like, I've still got my Super Nintendo in my bedroom. It still sits
Okay.
there, and every now and then I fire it up and play something. But
That's awesome.
yeah, so I don't know. I'm
But
kinda,
yeah, like you were saying, Billy, I just pulled up howlongtobeat.com here to check out Loom. The fastest
probably
times
not
anyone's beated is an hour and 50 minutes, but the average time is 3 hours, which is kind of what I
I can
expected.
believe
It
that.
took me about an hour to get to where we were at.
yeah.
And
The
like
longest
a
it took someone
3-hour
was 5
game for the
hours,
first
so-
time is not bad. Like
No, absolutely.
that's like a
not.
Journey or a Portal or something like that. That's totally fine for me. Now I would blanch if you told me to pay $50 for the same experience.
Sure.
Nowadays anyway. Like back in the day things were different, but
Yeah.
but nowadays like you can get an indie game that has 3 times this much content. Now it may not be as polished, but it's a trade-off, right?
I don't know, because
Yeah.
at the same time, I could see myself paying $50 for Brothers, because that's a game that changes my outlook on how I think games can be told,
Right.
despite it only being 3 hours long. And I
Okay,
think
but you didn't know that going into it.
that is true.
and there's the rub, right? Like, how do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
convince people that this is a life-changing experience when nobody knows that it's a life-changing experience
Yeah.
yet?
Yeah.
And you can't, and like that was the problem with Loom, and that was why it sold so badly, because the critics really, really loved it. I mean,
Yeah, I
they
saw
were
that. I looked that
"Oh
up.
my
Like, they got
God,
like
it's
5 out of
amazing."
5s everywhere, and
Yeah.
But
Well, it
when-
was totally different from any other adventure game at the time. So
right, but now you've got to take into account the price point that we're talking about, which is $50, was pretty steep, and you've got to take into account that we're talking about a very niche kind of game, which is an adventure game. Because at that time we were at the beginning of the end of the adventure game era, and you got to also take into account the kind of really weird demographic that was starting to go up around computer games, which was it stopped being super nerdy people and it started being the NES kids.
Mhm.
And as soon as you had the NES and the SNES people, like roll into town, they would look at Loom and they go, "I don't understand this. What is going on?"
Yeah. Well,
And,
that still happens.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the generation I see now, and I'm sorry, I don't mean any disrespect towards you, George, but I don't like most console playing.
Right.
Because it does that. It still does that. But
Right.
they're now that consoles and PCs are so equal,
Yeah.
it's sort of changing. It's
Well,
overlapping.
yeah, this generation,
It's overlapping
the
more.
hardware structure is literally the exact same.
I have
thing.
to
Right.
not to stand up for my generation because with that being said, like for me at least, it does get frustrating games that take 80+ hours to beat.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially for me, who I'm a little bit OCD, so I feel like
Oh yeah,
I
you
need
have to
to
finish
search-
Yeah,
every.
yeah. I'm that
I
way
need
too.
to
I
search-
bought the game. I need to do everything in the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to search every little nook and cranny, and here I am trying out the new Doom right now. But now that there's collectibles, I'm like spending way much more time on this game than I should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, here's how I did that, because I'm that way too. I want to see every little bit of it. I want to search every aspect, because there are always secrets and that kind of stuff, and that comes from older generation playing video games, because they did
Yeah.
that. They would hide little things in corners.
They would.
Yeah.
Like
And,
if you take any Sierra game, right, there's a score at the top line, and 90% of the time your first run through you would never actually get the total score.
Sure.
So you'd go back and you'd go and try and find where you lost those points, and very often it's because they hid something away.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
god.
and so that's how I'm treating Doom. I went through the first one and I looked around and I did this and that, but my ultimate goal was to play through it, and then I would come back on a second playthrough and just fucking scour it. Just go through it.
Right.
See, and my mentality there is I'd rather spend the 80+ hours to find every single collectible my first playthrough, so when I go back my second time, I can just
go
enjoy
through
the
So
game.
then you can
Yeah.
just blow through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Does anyone-
that's kind of like my thing. Like the perfect example for me is the Arkham games. Like I love the Arkham games, but like I spend my first playthrough, I will literally find every single Riddler trophy,
Yep.
every single
Well,
like
those games are really old school. They are basically exactly like the old Metroid games in that they literally incorporate things that you can see it, but you don't have
Yeah.
time to
But
get
you
to it until
Right.
13 hours
Yeah,
later.
are
and
you
you come
telling me
back to it.
Batman
Yeah.
can't? Are you telling me Batman can't cut through a chain link fence? Really?
Not
really?
without Catwoman's claws, he can't. Nope.
You know, and so it's like for me that's the way I kind of play things is I will scour areas like in Batman, so I know I'm going to go back and play it again, but when I play it again I don't want to worry about Riddler trophies. I
Yeah,
just
right.
want to enjoy the story.
Yeah,
So
when it
that's
gets
one
to
of the-
a certain point, when the collectibles get too much, like Mad Max, it was way too much for me. I was
Right.
at a
And it
certain
was
point, I just go,
Can't anymore.
it's all just noise. I'm just gonna play the things I care
Right.
about and do the certain
Right.
side quests that interest me, and then move along.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
speaking of Mad Max, at some point I want to talk about how much I hate that game.
I
We'll
love
save
that
for
game.
another. We'll save that for another.
Yeah.
episode.
Though that probably will
Okay.
never be a book club. That's too long.
So let's just bring this back to Loom. You'll be
Yes.
pleased to know that as you encounter it, everything that you encounter is something that you will see for the first time, experience for the first time, and not have to worry about side issue things, because there aren't a lot of side issue things in Loom. So if you played the game, you will have seen everything. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the one good thing. The second thing is that Loom is a game that I'm going to suggest. This is not something that will happen to us because it will be 20 years in the future. But 20 years from now, you're going to want to pick up Loom again and play it again, because you will have a totally different perspective on this game in particular, as opposed to a lot of other games that you'll see now.
I could see
I'm
that.
playing it 20 years later, and it's a lot more evocative now.
Well, we
but
did
I felt
even-
the same way about the Dig. The Dig is the same thing. I played it as
The
as,
Dig, I think, was
like,
one of my first LucasArts games
right.
that I played. Never finished
Screw
it.
this, hang on. I'm gonna let you talk in a second. But the Dig was a game that I played about 20 years ago, and then had a very specific perspective on. And I went back and I played it again, and as a person 20 years later, there were lots more small things that made a lot more psychological and that kind of sense.
Yeah.
So playing Loom now as a much older person, looking at the way it's built and the way it's structured and the things it's doing and the storytelling, it's a fantastic game just for that. And 20 years from now, you'll try and play it again and you'll have possibly the same experience I'm having.
Yeah.
Sorry, Scooters, you wanted to
Assuming
Well, I
the
was just going to
world
say,
is still
we did a sort of an article related to this. It's like a
We
game
did.
from your past that has a more meaning now than it did then.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things that the first impression might leave you a different taste in your mouth than you would get several years later trying it again. And I enjoy that kind of thing. So.
Yeah. Does anyone want to take a guess at how much $50 in 1990 would be nowadays? And then I want to ask whether or not you think that Loom is worth that price.
$50 and 90. I'm gonna say $75 around that.
No, it's going to
too
be
low.
more.
It's more than that.
Yeah, I'd say
It's
probably
more.
90, 95.
Yep. $91.
I would not pay
I-
$91 for this game.
I would.
No.
I wouldn't pay $91 for
Okay,
any. I don't think
here's
there's a
the thing.
game I would pay $91 for.
If I had bought this game for like $5 and played through it and absolutely loved it, then I could see buying like a collector's edition for $90.
Yeah,
Right.
if I could also buy a Loom with it, I would buy it for $90.
Just get a
If you could buy a bus with it,
If I could buy a bus with it. Yeah.
If it came with this walking stick, you know.
Yeah, I
I
can
would
see
say,
that.
you know,
Yeah.
but like I find that funny because even thinking about it now, because especially in our culture, we are so dead set. Like GameStop has us, even Amazon has us. Like you need to get the collector edition, and I'm tired of that. Like
So,
some
okay.
games sure, but like I don't know if I'd pay $90 for this game.
Yeah,
Okay,
some
you-
games are worth a collector's edition, but that's too much of a sidetrack. I don't know if. Yeah, I think you're right. I think if it came with a really cool, like if you got a distaff.
Yeah, if
Would-
I
That would be
got a
super
distaff, that
cool,
would be
man.
awesome.
Okay, so good news about Loom. When you bought it in 1990, right? Everyone got the same version of the game. Everyone. And the game included the audio drama. It included the book of patterns. It included the manual on the game discs. And then it had various LucasArts flyers.
So
So
it was
everyone
basically like a
got-
deluxe version of a game now.
Yes,
As
it
it's set up.
had everything in it that you would possibly need to finish the game. But, I mean, obviously, as time has worn on, we've stopped doing that kind of thing. Now, if they package Loom, it would literally just be a disc.
Yeah. And then you could buy all that stuff separately.
Yes.
Yeah, I
so-
mean, with that being said, like, all things considered, I'm glad I'm playing the game.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
having fun. Do you want us to set, like, where are we now playing till the end of the game?
We're
or
playing
what
until
are we-
the end. That was
Okay.
literally the next thing I was going to bring up.
Okay.
So, we're probably going to wind this game club session down now. So, you need to know, if you're playing along with us, that what's going to happen next is we're going to finish the game. Because there's stuff that happens and there's a lot of it, but there's not a lot of stuff to do very much anymore. So we're going to go to the end of the game, and that's where we're going to pick up next week. We're going to talk about Loom, but not much more, because we're going to start about the next thing that we're going to start.
Yeah.
Because there isn't going to be a lot more to talk about.
I
other
feel
than the
like
end of
we'll be
Loom.
able to talk a lot more about the story in detail, which is the one thing we really haven't talked about too much
Right.
here, and I think that's fine because we talked about the
We can have an
mechanics and
analysis
the
of the
background of the
story.
game for an
You know-
hour. So
I'm really excited to play the rest of it. This was one of the games. I've been playing a lot of like action games recently, so I was unsure going back to like a slower adventure game style if I would really get
Right.
into it. And I totally did. It got to the point where I got to the dragon where we stopped now, and I was just
And
like,
you
no,
wanted-
I want to keep going. I want to keep going.
Yeah,
Come on,
I
let's
did.
do
I
this.
did.
I know. I was
I
like,
got
come
this
on,
one
everybody,
first,
get
yeah.
here so we could go a little further. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to stop either.
Yeah.
You did. I saw that message in Slack. You're like, let's finish the game. I'm like, no, there's a reason we're stopping
No,
here.
come on.
That says a lot about the game, right? That,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
all of us played it and we were like, you know what, we don't want to stop. We want to keep going.
Yeah, I was
That's-
very
And I had
mad
to
at
be the
Grey
one-
Wolf. Yeah, I was very
I
mad
have
at
to be
Grey
the one
Wolf for
saying,
being
no,
the
no,
dad.
hold on.
Shut up, Dad. Don't tell me what to
You're not
clean
my
your
real
room.
do.
dad.
I could finish the game
No,
if I want
probably
to.
not.
With that,
I hope not.
Okay, so next week
Strange turn of
for our
events.
listeners, we finish off the game and then we will have an analysis of the story, and then what we will re-roll to see who
We will
is-
reroll.
Yeah, we'll do
Next-
another
Yeah,
roll
we'll,
for
we'll,
another
we'll
for the next
re-roll,
game.
and Gray will probably sit absent for that one for the roll.
Yes.
He'll nominate
Yes.
him.
Well,
Well, he'll
I'm
still-
not allowed to roll
You'll
again.
still play the
until-
game.
Yes.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
but he won't be
I will
included in the roll because
participate.
we've already
Yeah.
played his choice. Yeah.
Yes. What we're basically saying is we'll roll the d4, not a d5,
Yeah.
Yep.
because I will be the one person out then.
Until
There
it
we go.
gets down to 2 people, and then we'll flip a coin.
Yes. And then we'll just play the last game after
That's
that.
a D2.
So, okay, so what we're going to be doing is next week we will meet you at probably kind of the same time slot, just before the podcast, which is not happening this week, by the way. I don't think, anyway.
No, you guys are welcome to do it, but I'm gonna sit that one out.
Right, okay. We're going to get to the end of Loom. We will sit down and talk a little bit about the story, because that's the one thing we haven't talked about. We will re-roll for a new game. I will not be able to participate in the roll, but I will be playing the game with everyone else.
Yep.
So that has been it. This has been the Game Club Take 2
Yeah.
Loom Edition.
We've
It's
now
like
we've now
this
caught
time-
up with how far we got in the game club last time, because I'm pretty sure we did 2. Was it 2, Billy, or was it 3
You did
last
2.
time?
Did too. And honestly, like, length into a game, we did far better this time than we did last time.
Yeah, we got halfway through a game and not 2 missions.
What was
in.
the last game?
the
It
original
was
Deus Ex?
Deus
Yeah.
Ex.
Oh, okay.
The original
It was a
Deus
bad
Ex.
call for this. It was going to
It's
take
too
way
long.
too long.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I mean, I have thought about this a lot now, and I think that what we'll probably do is we'll try things that we can finish in a week or two.
Yeah, I
So-
think that's the best way to do it.
We will probably run through the choices, and then just before we put them up on the Game Club, we'll talk about them and just say, you know, this looks a little too long. We'll try something shorter.
Yeah. And
But
if this isn't a
that's-
format that we like, then we can even try going, okay, here's all 5 of us are going to put forward a game, and then we have so long to finish them, and then we'll talk about them as we finish them. I don't know. I like this format though. I think
Yeah,
this
so
is-
far I'm
I
enjoying it
prefer
too.
this format too, because it means
Yeah.
that we're all talking about the same thing.
Yep.
But that's admin. You don't need to hear us talk about admin. We will see you next week. Have a great week, folks. This is
Thanks,
Twinstiq
everyone.
saying
Have a good
goodbye.
week.
Yep. We'll see you
Phil-
guys next week when we finish talking about Loom.
Awesome.
Yep.
Can't wait.
All right.